and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I'm Naila Shuja, and these are the headlines. The United States has appreciated Pakistan's efforts to advance the Afghan peace process and stability in South Asia. At a briefing, U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said Pakistan has much to gain from the Afghan peace and it has a critical role in supporting the outcome. He added that Washington will continue to work closely with its Pakistani partners in this regard. The U.S. and British embassies have accused the Taliban of massacring civilians in Afghanistan's spin bulldog city of Kandahar province. Taking to Twitter, the embassies in Kabul said the killings could constitute war crimes and the Taliban should be held accountable. In response, a Taliban spokesperson said that the accusations are baseless. Moscow says the United States has asked 24 Russian diplomats to leave the country by the 3rd of September after their visas expire. In an interview, Russian Ambassador Anatoly Antonov said that almost all of the diplomats will leave because Washington has tightened visa issuing procedures. However, the United States State Department has rejected the claim, saying Antonov's characterization of the situation is not accurate. Seoul says Pyongyang wants international sanctions to be lifted in order to restart denuclearization talks with the U.S. After being briefed by the country's main intelligence agency, South Korean lawmakers said two Koreas have shared a willingness to rebuild trust and improve ties since April. They said North Korean leader Kim Jong-un requested South to reconnect the hotlines. South Korea has detected its first case of India's new Delta Plus variant of COVID-19. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered 67 new deaths and nearly 3,600 infections in the past 24 hours. Globally, the death toll has surpassed 4.2 million, with nearly 199 million infections so far. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back. The United States has appreciated Pakistan's efforts to advance the Afghan peace process and stability in South Asia. U.S. State Department spokesperson said Pakistan has much to gain and it will continue to have a critical role in supporting the outcome. At a briefing, Ned Price said Washington will continue to work closely with its Pakistani partners in this regard. Price also accused the Taliban of committing outrageous and atrocious acts of violence. The spokesperson called on the Taliban to stop their attacks if they truly support a negotiated settlement. Price noted that the world will not accept the forced imposition of a government in Afghanistan. He added that only the Afghan-led and Afghan-owned government will be eligible for assistance. For more on this, we are joined by Mr. Rustam Shah Muhammad, a political analyst. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Pakistan has been on the frontline state in both the United States' war on terror and now the push for peace in Afghanistan. Do you believe that Washington and the international community have done enough to acknowledge, appreciate, and highlight Islamabad's commitments and efforts?
Not really. I mean, Pakistan has paid a high price for its involvement in Afghanistan, and I think that was a strategically wrong decision by then President Musharraf to get Pakistan engaged in a war with such a high cost and such a lot of instability, particularly in the border areas. Pakistan has sacrificed a lot, but the international community, under pressure from Washington, has not tried to appreciate the contribution that Pakistan has made, sacrifices that Pakistanis have made, and the impact on Pakistan's economy of an unwarranted and unnecessary war that was imposed on Afghanistan, and from the effects of which Afghanistan and Pakistan have suffered for the last 20 years.
Mr. Rustam, now the situation in Afghanistan is apparently spiraling out of control. Is there any hope of a peaceful political settlement between President Ashraf Ghani and the Taliban?
No, not really. The biggest impediment to peace is the Ghani government itself, because they want reconciliation, which would continue, which would seek to continue this present system. The Taliban would just come on board. They will be mainstreamed in the Afghanistan's politics, but the government of Ashraf Ghani would remain in power. That is absolutely not acceptable to Taliban. In any settlement, in any reconciliation, the Ashraf Ghani's government will have to go, and a broad-based, multi-ethnic transitional government will have to be instituted, will have to be formed, and that can be formed only by the Grand Assembly or Aloy Jirga, which would be convened, which will represent all factions, all parties, all provinces, all ethnicities, and that is a historic Afghanistan institution, and it's a long historic tradition in Afghanistan. The Aloy Jirga or the Grand Assembly's decisions would be accepted by everybody, and that is the only way out of this impasse, of this deadlock that confronts now, and that could now spiral into a civil war in Afghanistan. But the Afghan government wants to protect itself. They are more keen on protecting their own turf rather than keeping the country united. That approach is not going to help. The Americans are not bringing enough pressure to bear upon the Kabul government to make room for a transitional government in the larger interest of Afghanistan's unity and stability. And without that, the Afghan government would not be willing to be sidelined. Now, if that doesn't happen, then of course the Taliban will keep advancing and taking and capturing more territory. But that would come at the cost of a lot of fatalities, both from the Taliban and the Afghan army, and also the civilian population, which will bear the brunt of the civil war if and when that begins. The signs are that the regional militias, which have been established now, which have been created with the help of the government, would be a recipe for a civil war, and that could be disastrous.
Mr. Rustam Shah Muhammad, thank you so much for speaking to Indus News. Now moving on, the United States and British embassies have accused the Taliban of massacring civilians in Afghanistan's Spin Bolduc city of Kandahar province. Taking to Twitter, the embassies in Kabul said that the killings could constitute war crimes and the Taliban should be held accountable. In response, a Taliban spokesperson said that the accusations are baseless. In a tweet, UNAMA reported that at least 10 civilians have been killed in Lashkargah and 5 in Kandahar in the last 5 days alone. UNAMA said that the Taliban and Kabul must do more to protect civilians or the impact will be catastrophic. Earlier, Secretary of State Antony Blinken termed reports on Taliban atrocities as deeply disturbing and totally unacceptable. During a press briefing, he also said new Afghan refugee program poses diplomatic and logistical challenges. For more on this, we are joined by Mr. Mohammad Ayaz Wazir, former ambassador to Afghanistan. Thank you so much for your time. Now, with the Afghan air power now under attack, is the United States over-the-horizon capability enough to prevent Afghanistan from plunging into another widespread decade-long civil war?
Well, America has already declared that, we are taking the troops out of Afghanistan, but not abandoning Afghanistan. So they will try, according to the agreement that they had signed with Ashraf Ghani's government, I think in 2014 or 15, the Security Pact. Under that also they are required to provide security to the Afghan government. So they'll try to make it extremely difficult for the Taliban to walk into major cities. So I think the American will do their utmost to prevent a civil war kind of a situation in Afghanistan.
Mr. Vizier, how crucial is the battle for Helmand's provincial capital strategically and symbolically?
Well, it's extremely important. Helmand was the focus of the NATO forces, particularly the British, when they were here. And that was shown as a role model during their time. So if that falls, the next would obviously be Kandahar, which they would make a capital, which was already in their previous term a capital also. That will have much more symbolic value than Helmandi one. So Helmand will open the floodgate for taking the other close by provinces.
Mr. Vizier, now President Ashraf Ghani has started blaming the United States for the situation in Afghanistan. After trillions of dollars and extensive training and equipment, do you believe that it is a valid criticism?
Well, I would say both needs to be criticized for the situation in Afghanistan. Ashraf Ghani and America both. They were hand in glove in the situation over there. The American decided to go out after 20 years, leaving Afghanistan in complete mess. There is no real system that can control the whole country. Some is controlled by the Afghan government and the rest is controlled by the Taliban, and they are fighting. The Americans should not have left this way. They should have worked on patch up between the two for some future dispensation, so that the bloodshed that we can see or we are afraid of that it will take place, that could have been easily avoided. So both are I would say, to be blamed for the mess in Afghanistan.
Mr. Mohammad Ayaz Vizier, thank you so much for speaking to Indus News. Now moving on, Indian troops have martyred another civilian in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The youth was targeted during a so-called cordon and search operation in the Bandipora district. The authorities have suspended internet and mobile services in the Chandajia area. The operation was going on till the last reports came in. The occupation forces have martyred hundreds of Kashmiris since the revocation of the Valley's special status in 2019. Pakistan has rejected India's claim that occupied Jammu and Kashmir was its integral part. Islamabad's envoy to the United Nations, Munir Akram, says that the valley is UN-recognized disputed territory. In a tweet, Akram said Security Council's resolution calling for a plebiscite in the occupied Kashmir remain in force. He said New Delhi's move of revoking the valley's special status violates Council's resolutions, and hence India's unilateral and illegal actions of the 5th August 2019 are null and void. Akram noted that a dialogue between New Delhi and Islamabad will be productive once India reverses its move and reassents the demographic changes initiated in the valley and halts its rights abuses in occupied Kashmir. Pakistan has called out India for trying to stop international cricketers from taking part in the Kashmir Premier League. Speaking to reporters in Islamabad, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said India should not politicize sport. He said International Cricket Council should take notice of the Indian board's negative attitude. The remarks came after former England spinner Monty Panesar pulled out of the tournament, citing pressure from India. Earlier, South African batsman Herschel Gibbs said that India threatened him of denying visa if he participated in the league. The tournament will kickstart on the 6th of August in Muzaffarabad. In Pakistan, security forces have killed 2 terrorists in an intelligence-based operations in North Waziristan. According to the military's media wing, 2 soldiers were wounded during the exchange of fire. It said the terrorists were involved in attacks on security forces. Earlier, a soldier embraced martyrdom when terrorists opened fire on a military post in Ghorium area. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Israel's top court has offered Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah a so-called protected status. The Supreme Court adjourned an appeal from 4 Palestinian families against their forced expulsion. Under the protected status, the 4 Palestinian families are supposed to live in their own homes as tenants. Their properties will have Israeli ownership and they will have to pay a symbolic annual rent. The court gave the Palestinians 7 days to present a list of qualifying residents, effectively deferring a final decision until at least then. Palestinian families have rejected the proposal. Earlier in May, the issue sparked a conflict that saw hundreds of Palestinians killed at the hands of Israeli forces. The United States says it is confident that Iran attacked an Israeli oil tanker last week off the coast of Oman that killed 2 crew members. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says that the United States has conducted a thorough review of the incident. Blinken said that the United States is in close contact with the United Kingdom, Israel, Romania, and others, and there will be a collective response. In a press briefing, he said Iran's actions is a direct threat to freedom of navigation and commerce. He said there is no justification for this attack on a peaceful vessel on a commercial mission in international waters. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom and Iran have summoned each other's diplomats in the row. Tehran denies involvement in the attack and has vowed a crushing response if its interests are threatened. Moscow says the United States has asked 24 Russian diplomats to leave the country by the 3rd of September after their visas expire. The latest development comes amid highlighting tensions between Moscow and Washington. In an interview, a Russian ambassador to the United States, Anatoly Antonov, said that almost all of the diplomats will leave Washington abruptly, tighten visa issuing procedures. He accused the United States of applying a restriction of 3 years assignment period for Russian diplomats only. Meanwhile, the United States Department rejected the claim, saying Antonov's characterization of the situation is not accurate. At a briefing, spokesperson Ned Price said Washington is not using diplomats' visa to retaliate against Moscow. Seoul says Pyongyang wants international sanctions to be lifted in order to restart denuclearization talks with the United States. A group of South Korean lawmakers was briefed by the country's main intelligence agency. The briefing comes a week after the 2 Koreas restored hotlines that North Korea suspended a year ago. The lawmakers said North Korean leader Kim Jong-un requested South Korea to reconnect the hotlines. They said the 2 Koreas have shared a willingness to rebuild trust and improve ties since April. The lawmakers noted Pyongyang is in need of some 1 million tons of rice as coronavirus pandemic and bad weather battered its economy. South Korea has detected its first cases of new Delta Plus variant of COVID-19. The virus has claimed more than 4.2 million lives globally and has infected nearly 199 million people. More in this report. A fierce surge by the Delta variant is swamping hospitals across the world once again. The U.S. states of Florida and Louisiana are at record levels of hospitalizations, while doctors warned of the darkest days yet. Meanwhile, Cuba has completed a vaccination drive in the capital, Havana.
A positive piece of news that we have today is that we have concluded with the vaccination process in Havana's 15 municipalities. More than 1,355,000 people have been vaccinated. This is a very important feat and has involved a praiseworthy and big effort from all structures. There has been an important participation from all of the government structures.
The German government condemned the violence at protests in Berlin, where police arrested over 600 people and a man died after being detained. Germany plans to offer booster shots to vulnerable people from September, as well as offer vaccinations to children over 12. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he wants to get the travel industry moving again with a simple, user-friendly system. This comes amid rising disapproval of Britain's 10-day quarantine requirement among travelers from Europe.
We are going to England to see our children whom we haven't seen since Christmas in 2019. And to go there, we must observe a 10-day quarantine with 2 PCR tests after the end of the 10 days. This is extremely difficult, especially the forms to fill up for the British government. Meanwhile, things are happening in silence between Britain and France. Our children who are meant to see us at home will not be coming due to the imposed quarantine for those coming to France. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Serbia is benefiting from quarantine tourism as thousands of Indians make a 2-week stopover on the way to other countries. Meanwhile, Japan has threatened to publicly shame the people not complying with coronavirus border control measures. It will also shift policy to focus on hospitalizing patients who are seriously ill to avoid strain on the medical system. Coronavirus has claimed another 67 lives in Pakistan over the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the death toll has risen to 23,529. It says the virus infected nearly 3,600 people overnight. The positivity rate of cases has declined to 7.19%. The ministry said the number of active cases has topped 75,000. Nearly 3,400 of them are in critical condition. Pakistan has reported more than 1,043,000 cases so far, while over 944,000 people have recovered from the disease. Armenia's president has appointed Nikol Pashinyan for a second term as prime minister. The move follows a June parliamentary elections that was won by Pashinyan's party. According to Armenian constitution, the prime minister has 15 days to form a new government. Pashinyan had called the early election in an attempt to end a political crisis. Protests broke out in the country after Armenia ceded territory to Azerbaijan during the Nagorno-Karabakh war last year. Over 10,000 people have been evacuated from the Turkish province of Mughula to escape the deadly wildfires. Due to a record-breaking heat wave covering much of southeastern Europe, wildfires have wreaked havoc across Turkey, Italy, and Greece. Firefighters from the European Union, along with local volunteers, have been fighting fires near the coastline for the 7th day. A terrorist group called Children of Fire has claimed responsibility for Turkey's forest fires. Meanwhile, Italian firefighters are using helicopters to fight the fires along Italy's Adriatic coast and Sicily region. In Greece, firefighters across the country are battling to get hundreds of wildfires under control. The International Monetary Fund has officially approved increasing its lending capacity by $650 billion. This was the last step in approving an initiative to boost aid to the most vulnerable countries. Fund's head Kristalina Georgieva said that the decision is the largest special drawing rights allocation in the history of IMF. In a statement, she said that it is a shot in the arm for the global economy during an unprecedented crisis. Georgieva noted that the move will help countries most vulnerable to the COVID-19. Member countries will be allocated increased lending capacity as per IMF quota. Meanwhile, emerging and developing nations will receive around $275 billion in total. The program, which was approved by the fund's executive board in mid-July, will be implemented on the 23rd of August. Asian stock markets are trading lower following Wall Street's slip. Jitters about the fast spread of the coronavirus Delta variant have dented enthusiasm about strong corporate profits. The Nikkei 225 in Japan has slipped over 0.5%, while Topix index shed close to 0.5%. In Australia, the ASX 200 dipped more than 0.25%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng and stocks in mainland China plunged more than 0.25%. South Korea's Kospi bucked the overall trend as it rose over 0.25%. Now moving on, in the Tokyo Olympics, Norway, New Zealand, Cuba, Japan, and Germany have captured gold medals on the 11th day of the Games. China leads the medal standings with 29 golds, followed by the United States with 22 and host Japan on 18. This report has more on the Games. Day 11 of the Games will feature a total of 26 gold medal events. Norway's Karsten Warholm won the country's second gold medal in men's 400-meter hurdles. He crossed the finish line in a world record time of 45.94 seconds. New Zealand's Lisa Carrington won the gold medal in the women's kayak single 200 meters event. Cuban pair of Sergey Torres and Fernando George picked up the gold in men's canoe double 1,000 meters competition. Meanwhile, Sina Iri has become Japan's first female boxer to win the women's featherweight boxing gold. She upset the reigning world champion Nesty Peticio of the Philippines with a unanimous decision. Germany's reigning world champion Malaika Mihambo bagged the women's long jump gold with a leap of 7 meters. In hockey, world champions Belgium secured a spot in the men's final by thrashing India 5-2. They will now face either Australia or Germany in the gold medal match on Thursday. In La Liga, Barcelona have unveiled their latest signing, Emerson Royal from Real Betis. Barca initially brought half of the rights to Emerson in 2019 with Betis before paying $10 million this summer to sign him outright. Emerson bagged 5 goals and 10 assists with the Andalusian side since joining in January 2019. Club president Joan Laporta welcomed the right back, saying he will be an important part of the Barca future. He also compared Emerson to the former Brazilian right back Dani Alves and Juanito Bellatini. Barcelona will start their La Liga campaign from the 15th of August, hosting Real Sociedad in the opener. It's now time to take a look at the weather updates from around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at Indus.News.